We want to see increasing access to capital for Aboriginal business development and full participation in the Canadian economy. We want to remove the punitive 2% funding cap on the transfers to Aboriginal communities and $1 billion investment program over the next 4 years for the education deficit. Thank you.
Thank you. James, please.
Okay, well, thanks. First, the Nanaimo, by and large, their traditional territory is in the Nanaimo-Cowichan riding. Very little overlap on the Nanaimo-Alberni side. Let me tell you a little bit of what's happening on the Nanaimo-Alberni side. First, we've had the first major multi-nation treaty signed, the Mulnith Treaty. You have 4 of the 5 Mulnith nations in the Nanaimo-Alberni riding. That would be the Wyatt, the Uchuckalsat, the Ucluelet, and the Tokat. They just had a major celebration of this treaty, that they're out from under the Indian Act. They have their own economic development plans. Some of them have already passed their first laws. They burned the Indian Act. They're now proud to be Canadians. Economic development for these nations is going to benefit the entire West Coast and surrounding communities. The Clayoquot First Nation, we just opened their Canoe Creek Hydro Station. 5 megawatts, enough to supply the entire West Coast. It's a revenue stream that will help that First Nation as they move forward. So it's for the Nanaimo to move ahead. There's a treaty process in place, and we're hopeful that they will follow the cue of other nations that are moving ahead and get on the wagon, and let's move ahead and see these issues resolved.
Thank you. The second question goes to Renee Miller. What can be done to provide some financial relief for the next generation of students in Canada who now leave school $27,000 in debt?
A terrific question, and the Liberals are well poised to answer that question during this election. The Learning Passport, introduced by the Liberal Party, will provide $1,000 for students to attend post-secondary education, and students from low-income families will be entitled to receive up to $1,500 per year. So between $4,000 and $6,000 in order to help supplement the cost of post-secondary education. I can assure you, having spent 9 years myself in post-secondary education, I know how important that money would have been to me going through our school system. And the Liberals are committed to making sure that if you want to go to school and to college, you will have the money to do so.
Thank you. Cindy Martman, please. 1 minute on this question.
Thank you. Well, $1,000 or $1,500 is a step in the right direction, but it's not enough. I say that we start to look at forgivable student loans. This is something that we want to initiate, especially in the healthcare profession. So if it's doctors or nurses or any other type of healthcare, we're looking at actually forgiving the student loans once they have successfully completed their education. But there's more than just the tuition. There's actually housing and the cost of living while you're going to school. Education is a key to ending poverty, and we must find ways to invest in education for all our students to be able to be contributing citizens in our country.
Thank you. James Lenny, please.
Thank you. Well, of course, it's in all of Canadians' interest and in the interest of the government to see Canada having the best educated workforce out there and to see Canadians taking advantage of all educational opportunities. What we have been able to do is expand the Canada Student Loan Program and the criteria involved with that. We've been able to extend the amount of money that students are able to earn before and still qualify for loans and for grants. We expanded the Canada Student Loan Grants Program, particularly targeting low-income students and students with disabilities. We increased transfers to the province for education by 40% in the time we've been Conservative government, and we think we're moving in the right direction. There's more that needs to be done, but those are good beginnings.
Thank you. Myron Jesperson.
Thank you. The long-term vision of the Greens is to have free post-secondary education for anyone who qualifies. And we think it's sad that someone now has to graduate with a huge debt burden and start their career thinking about how they can clear that big debt. We realize that we can't start there, and so we propose some interim steps. The first interim step would be a summer employment program, where at the end of your summer employment, you would get a grant that could apply to you towards your post-secondary education. A step up from that would be to forgive 50% of your student loan on graduation, in the process to that goal where post-secondary education would be free for anyone who qualifies.
Thank you. All Our next question goes to Zenny Martman. How would you advocate in Ottawa to aid the West Coast forest industry, and what steps do you think are needed to support out-of-work forestry workers? 2 minutes, please.
Well, the first thing that we would do is put a restriction on our export of our raw logs. That's what we're seeing too much in our country, whether it's raw logs, whether it's bitumen. We need to protect our natural resources and actually have value-added manufacturing right here. I would like to see us get back to investing in the mills, and we can work with the communities right here, whether it's forestry, whether it's fishing, whether it's manufacturing, and move into cleaner energies, new green jobs, and actually invest in the manufacturing right here in our own riding and on the West Coast.
Okay. James Lunny, 1 minute on this question, please.
Well, what we've done, first of all, we resolved that softwood lumber dispute, which brought $4 billion back to Canadian producers in our first term in government. And that capital has greatly helped our companies on the West Coast. In the last couple of years, we put in $100 million to a forest transformation fund. We had a $1 billion community adjustment fund for communities affected by the downturn in the worldwide economy. We have, in the current budget, a $60 million for forest innovation fund that will help our local companies. And of course, there was a $1 billion green energy transformation fund that has been tremendously important for Harmac and for catalyst mills. That's helping them to retool with energy efficiencies. That's going to help them be competitive in the market currently and keep those jobs right here in Nanaimo-Alberni.
Thank you. Myron Jesperson.
So once again, the vision of the Greens would be to have a sustainable forest industry, and we realize that that is a long-term goal, and what we view right now is some very short-term thinking in the forest industry, particularly what we see with the raw log exports. I happen to live on First Avenue in Port Alberni, and I see those logs loading on the ships right in front of my house. We think that that is a tragedy that those logs are being exported, and we would say as an immediate term effort is that we should keep those logs in the ground where they can improve the health of our forests, be available 40 or 50 years down the road as we look at that sustainable forestry. They can pull carbon out of the air, and we can sell that as carbon credits. And if we look at sustainable forestry, we can look at more jobs in the forest in a sustainable forestry than in the kind of way that we're managing it right now.
Thank you. Renee Miller, please.
Thank you very much. BC has the largest ratio of lumber, logs to lumber anywhere in Canada of 90%. And in speaking to constituents, I understand that 80% of our forestry workers are nearing retirement age in 10 years. Canada stands poised to take advantage of an incredible increasing lumber market around the world, especially in relation to some of the more recent disasters that we've seen in Japan. But unfortunately, we're not going to have the workers necessary to fulfill those roles when programs like BCIT's forestry program has been cut. The Liberal Party is committed to making sure that post-secondary education is funded, and we're committed to making sure that those programs get back on track and online so that we will have workers coming up in order to resume those positions in our forestry industry.
Thank you. Our next question goes to James Lunny. Why do you think unemployment rates have reached double digits in Nanaimo for 2 straight reporting periods, and what can be done to reverse this trend?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting development. Overall, we have seen a tremendous improvement in the employment picture. I think overall in BC it's about 8.8% currently. And across Canada, with 480,000 jobs produced, things are looking better. I noticed that there was some speculation that because things are improving in the Nanaimo area, we've had a lot of people coming into the area looking for employment. I think the upturn in the Harmac mill is good for the area. I think certainly on the Port Alberni side, all of the lumber mills are up and operating, and that's a positive thing. I think the new infrastructure that's coming into the area is going to have a tremendous impact as the cruise ship terminal gets going, and with the airport expansion that's going to help the economy in the mid-area, and creates a whole range of economic opportunities, as well as expansions at VIU and other targeted measures that are improving the opportunities right here in Nanaimo. In Nanaimo. So we're hopeful that those measures are going to make a difference as we move ahead.
If I could just follow up, though, can we identify why the number is so much higher in Nanaimo than the provincial and national averages?
Well, I think your own paper just did an article on that the other day, and I'm not sure that they're able to identify exactly why that would be. I think there's some speculation that people have been moving to the area.
I guess my question to everybody would be then, does your party, do you have a strategic way of dealing with it if you can't understand the problem from the beginning, I guess? And maybe it's not a fair question, but is that where we're at?
Well, that's a recent development, as you know, Cale. And I think, frankly, you know, as we move forward, those trends are going to have to be analyzed. And there's a lot of positive economic measures coming to Nanaimo with the economic development measures we've seen here. We'll see more tourism coming to the area. I think the cruise ships offer tremendous potential for the entire Mid-Island area, and we want to get that rail going so we can get wing and rail tours coming down right across the island, and that's going to help the economy as well.
Thank you. Myron Jesperson, please, 1 minute.
I don't think it should be a surprise to see these kind of numbers. I live in Port Alberni, so it could have been the canary in the mine, if you will, to see what has happened in Port Alberni and now to see it happening, let's say, here in Nanaimo. And I think we can see that we are losing the backbone that we have had here of these blue-collar jobs. And so for the Green Party, we would say that we need to replace those blue-collar jobs with what we call green-collar jobs, which should be equally well-paying, equally as creative, equally as sustaining of our local economy. And I can give you a couple of examples of what these could be. In the very short term, we could focus on things like energy retrofits of our public buildings and as well as our residences. There's a lot of employment that could go into this that yields great results in energy conservation and savings for the long term. But in addition to that,
I am just going to ask a follow-up question, though. You talk about replacing these lost jobs. How does government create jobs?
Well, one of the ways, I grew up in Alberta. 40 years ago, someone had the vision to develop the oil sands. It didn't make any economic sense to develop them at the time, but the government, together with private industry, went into that. We know that that has had negative consequences, but the question that I would say is, where is the government right now with the vision that is looking at what's our energy for the future and is investing right now with the kind of massive investment that it made 40 years ago in the oil sands, is investing in the future? It seems to me that that's the kind of leadership that we need in government that will provide those kind of jobs. And a lot of that is local. If we think about the nature of energy in the future, a lot of that is going to be local energy that's produced in our communities, which means jobs in our communities for that.
Thank you. Renee Miller.
A terrific question, and if I can answer your question directly, how do we fix it? I can assure you we don't fix it by offering corporate tax cuts to 5% of the wealthiest corporations in Canada. Research has shown that those form of tax cuts do nothing to stimulate the economy. They do nothing to address jobs in this country. We create jobs by investing in families and making sure our families are secure. We create jobs with tax incentives for investing in small businesses. There's, in addition to a 16% unemployment rate in our own riding, there's a 15% youth unemployment rate nationally. The Liberals can address that with 100% EI tax credit to employers willing to employ young workers. You don't address the 16% unemployment in our own riding without addressing poverty issues, without addressing women inequality issues, and I see those every single day in court. This government isn't doing anything to address those problems, and we need to fix that.
Perhaps I'll ask you to elaborate then on those issues. How do those issues affect the unemployment rate?
When you have poverty in our community, and when you have women's pay equity that has consistently dropped since 2006, that invariably